sideways, it's almost always because of a failure to plan.
Yes, yes.
Right. And that's why I said at the beginning, like, the hot take is that the building is actually not the hardest part. There's absolutely hard parts to it, at managing scalability, security. If you're going to put something out in the world that people can access, there's a whole lot that still goes into that.
Right.
These tools make it a lot easier to prototype.
Right. That's a great word.
Right.
Love that.
They make it a lot easier to prototype.
Mm-hmm.
But a good prototype or a good system is only as good as the design that goes into it.
Right.
So back to the frame. So there's 3 ways to approach this: off the shelf, low code, and build it. My opinion, most people, frankly, should be starting with looking at off the shelf tools. Okay. So we're talking about something that's off the shelf. We're talking about things that there's a product that already does it with some configuration. A super obvious example is using ChatGPT or Claude. You're not going to build your own LLM.
Right.
I guess unless you're DeepSeek. No,
Right.
we're not going to go and build our own LLM. And we shouldn't. There's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't do that. And I think hopefully it's just obvious we shouldn't do that. So for your LLMs, you should use something that's off the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
As you start to take things like data sovereignty clearly, in other words, how you own and manage your data, your security, and your systems as you start to build out agentic workflows, you shouldn't be building your own vector databases. You should be using something off the shelf because they're going to have thought through a lot of things that you aren't going to think through and that I'm not going to think through. Okay, so when you are, so I think in default, especially at an enterprise level, you almost always want to start with looking for, are there mature products that exist and do this with some form of light configuration? The one asterisk I would have, right, and I used the word mature, and I want to underline that word because there are a lot of startups right now
Mm-hmm.
that are building things and they're vibe coding their way to a product. And I don't begrudge them that, but I would be very, very careful about signing up for or using any commercially vibe coded product. That's again a whole other set of conversations we can have. But I would say if you're a business leader and you're thinking about off-the-shelf technologies, I would underline the word mature, which is to say that they existed at least as long as ChatGPT has been around.
Right. Well, I mean, I would almost take that, like, you've got those three mechanisms, but the right one isn't going to be determined by what the vendor is selling.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not, what you need should not be determined on the call. Like when you're having this exploratory call with the vendor, right? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, that sounds good, that sounds good, that sounds good. That is not the moment for deciding, because if you're deciding on the call, or if you're saying this is the vendor, and you can't match that to the workflow design that needs to become the output, that the results of that vendor's product.
Yep.
You're as well not thinking through it the right way, because you need to go into the call. I mean, I've done huge HRIS deployments over the course of my career, right? When you do that, you go in with what your needs are from the system. You do a needs analysis first, and then you go talk to the vendor. And then you go, yes, they can do this. Yes, they can do this. No, they can't do this. They can do this better. That is the right selection methodology.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I see with clients in AI, we don't go in with that needs analysis done. We just go in with this idea that AI can fix everything. And so I'm going to go hear what the vendor can do for me without knowing what I need to have done internally on the design of the work.
Yeah, I think what you're underscoring is why our framework is so important,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you've done this work of signal source design, you might not know all of the different intricate parts of the design to make it work, but what you will do is have a really informed vendor conversation.
Yes.
And it really should be taken care of. Like, this is my signal, this is the specific problem I'm trying to solve,
Mm-hmm.
right? These are the sources of information that feed that problem.
Right.
And this is how we're thinking, right? And again, you can use Claude, you can use ChatGPT. In fact, when we give quotes now to a lot of our clients, when we're building really sophisticated systems, we actually give them a version that they can give to their LLMs. And we say, hey, I want you to feed my quote to Claude or ChatGPT, whatever you're familiar with,
Right.
and ask it a series of questions. you should be vetting me as much as I'm vetting, as much as I'm trying to vet you, right?
Exactly.
And I think you're absolutely right. So many people right now have AI lust, or at least enough curiosity that they're like, what can it do for me?
Right.
And
or I've done a thing and that was so cool. It must be able to do everything, which it can do much. I agree. There's a lot that it can be done.
And if you go looking for someone to sell you something, they're gonna
sell you something.
Right?
That happens for sure, right? That's why they're salespeople, right?
Exactly.
They can sell. They can catch on your vibe of what you're looking for, and they will come up with exactly that thing. That's what they're trained to do, which is the importance of the signal source design.
100%.
Critical.
And even internally, it's funny with, this flow that you and I have put together, this process didn't come out of a vacuum. We've been building using this process for a very, very long time, because it is even internally for our own projects, our own products. Right? We have documents that we create that go through this, and when we're building products and we're building software, by far the most intensive part of the process is getting the design right. And we don't even start building until that spec is locked. Right. And I think to your point, you want to make sure that spec is locked before you go and talk to your different vendors.
Mm-hmm. And I think with AI specifically, and one of the key components even in our framework is source.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I would challenge most organizations, with knowledge workers especially, to say, where is that information? Where is it right now?
Yes.
And a lot of times it's in Bob's head.
Yeah.
And if it's in Bob's head, you can't point AI. I can't take my phone and point it at Jesse and say, okay, tell me everything Jesse knows, right? Like that just isn't. And so that source piece and that source component when you're working on getting to that deployment stage is so important. And a lot of times we haven't even thought about that. Like we haven't even thought about where the information is.
100%. So one, off the shelf, you want to make sure when you're thinking about off the shelf that you're thinking about mature products. Two, that when you are talking to your vendors, it is not an opportunity where you're like, hey, sell me some stuff.
Right, because they'll sell you.
Because they'll sell you. It's that you've actually gone through the steps that we've talked about before, and you're now bringing to your prospective vendors, this is the problem I'm trying to solve. This is the design spec that we're trying to hit. Can you help me? And by the way, it might be the case you might need a vendor to help you even with the design spec, and that is a completely legitimate thing. We do that all the time.
Exactly.
But that vendor at that point should not be selling you a solution. That vendor at that point should be helping you to come up with the design and be willing, and we often are, be willing to say, hey, look, here's the design. We've helped you put together the spec. If you know someone else that's better for building the thing,
right,
go ahead and do
that.
Right,
exactly. Right? But at least you're going to get the thing built.
Yes.
And not buying the thing and finding it doesn't work.
And going through that design process to make sure that what you're going to get is going to be, in fact, well designed. Mm-hmm. What's interesting, we used to, we've always done this part of the process, or this process. We used to just kind of lump design in with build, though, and what we found is very often there would be scope creep and there would be scope drift, and we shortchanged the design element, and it got to be a very expensive shortchanging. Right. But we weren't sure that our clients would understand the value of design. Having said that, we also couldn't keep doing what we're doing, so we actually started to break it out. We won't start building anything unless we've already put together a really good design spec, and we charge for the design spec. And in fact, the design spec is usually not an inexpensive part of our build process. And I was a little bit nervous at the beginning that clients would kind of have an awe about it. Mm-hmm. But what the opposite actually happened. I think in many cases, there have been some cases, just in many cases, there's some cases where we go through the design and both the client and us realize this probably isn't worth building. Right. Yes. Because the payoff that you think you're going to get isn't nearly as high as you think you're going to get. In many cases, what ends up happening is we say, hey, you know what? You don't actually need this sophisticated system. We can point you to a low-code solution. There have been many clients where they come in and they have this problem, and again, because they're not necessarily technical, it's overwhelming.
Right.
Which is another reason to do the design. It makes the overwhelm come way down.
Mm-hmm.
It's overwhelming, and they're like, I don't know how to solve this and this and this and this. So we sit down, we do the design with them, we work with them to come up with that spec, and we realize, you know what, you can actually do this with an end-to-end workflow. And say, what's that?
Right.
And so we pull open this visual editor,
right.
And we show them how you can drag and drop different nodes. What you're trying to do is move this from here to here and change this to this, and we'll show them.
Right.
You know, here's what that workflow looks like. And so we'll build a workflow for them, teach them how to build their own workflows. And then, you know, we check back in a few months later and they're like, oh my gosh, I've automated this and I've automated this and I've automated this, because they took that low code approach. Because once the design was clear, it became really obvious that they didn't actually need to go build in a traditional sense in terms of custom software. Their build could be done with a low code off the shelf kind of tool, the same way you used Claude to get this idea out of your head and build a thing that you could ultimately use.
Right. But I think it's important to go back to design for a minute, because that point, the time that we spend in design, and I've been through this on so many different projects, right? We come into the design, whatever we used to call it, right? But we're trying to replace the system that we have with a more efficient system.
Yep.
But we're not thinking about the business processes that need to be modified. Again, the work design that needs to be modified to gain the efficiency. So we buy a thing and we take our old processes and we keep trying to fit it into this thing and it doesn't work. Well, you have to be conscious in the design to go back to signal, because what is the problem you're really trying to solve? And I mean, I feel like we're repeating ourselves, but it's so important, because if we don't know that, we're going to try to, because we're humans, we are going to try to redesign the thing that we know right now with some enhancements, but we're going to spend more time trying to rebuild the thing that we have now in a better way, let's say, without really thinking about what does that final thing look like? What's that final outcome? What's it going to operate like? So that design phase, because when you get into low code, it's the same thing, right? You still have the capability to grab a hold of something to get you there in a faster way. But if you're not thinking about that, and I'm going to use an example, I'll use recruiting, right? So recruiting systems, you know, we have this process that we go through in recruiting, right? We write the job description, we put it in the system puts it on the website puts it on Indeed, the candidates go there, it brings the candidate flow back into the HRS system, the recruiters go in and source the candidates, they bring them forward. I mean, that's a very typical process, right? But what we're not looking for is more volume. A lot of times when we're looking at recruiting systems, we're thinking it's just a volume issue. No, it's a quality issue. I don't want to look at 200 candidates and only 5 of them are worthwhile.
Yeah.
I'm going to look at 5. So I'm not trying to solve.
Volume actually hurts in that case.
Exactly. So in that particular example, we're not solving for volume, but a lot of times we think, well, if we just get more, we'll find the person hiding under the rock. That's not the case. And so we have to be really careful on that design piece, because we go in with our current business process. I'm not gonna say system. We go in with our current business process, the current way our work is designed today, and then we try to buy the thing. And then it doesn't come up with better results. And you're like, well, I don't know why. We didn't spend enough time in design. And that exact recruiting example, I've sat through it multiple times. We're not looking for volume. We're looking to have quality and only talk to the top 5. So how do we get better at quality, not volume?
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me of a conversation we had a few months back, and I don't even remember all of the context, but I do remember that the person wanted to talk to us because they wanted to implement AI in a particular thing. And as we were listening to her, it took me maybe 5 or 10 minutes of listening to what she was trying to do. And I was like, you don't even need AI for that.
Right.
Like that is a data pipeline problem, not an AI problem, right? And I think if you've done that design phase well, what you may even realize is that what you think is an AI problem.
Right.
Turns out it's
It might not
actually
be.
not even an AI problem.
Right.
It might just be, and what's great is that so many of these low-code tools in particular are really good at moving things around that don't need AI. Now, in your example that you described, the recruiting example, if I'm thinking about how would I solve this problem for quality and for quantity, right? So in my mind, I'd be thinking, this is a really easy solution to implement with a low-code tool. So I would, for instance, be thinking, okay, you just mapped out a whole flow of work. I think about this in terms of the flows of information. Okay, so you have a flow of work, but there's also a flow of information as information is moving from description to really all of the other things you mentioned, like the website and Indeed. Those are just interfaces.
Correct.
With the description being the system of record,
Right.
the thing that matters. Then on the other end, you've got a resume coming in and then feeding into an HR system, right? That's another type of information. So our different types of information
Sources.
are
Right.
just the description and then the whatever the worker puts in. Right. Okay. Now you imagine, first of all, let's go back to off the shelf. There are lots of off the shelf recruiting tools now that will help you score candidates. Right. So what I'm about to say, I don't want to contradict what I said earlier, which is that frankly, this is a problem you have to solve. Go and look at what the vendors offer, because what I'm going to say is only to illustrate the concept of low code. In reality, I think all good ATSs will do what I'm about to say at some level. Okay. So now if I'm thinking about this as a low code, maybe I can't afford an ATS. Let's just say you're in that bucket. Can't afford an ATS, right? Or I don't do enough recruiting that it makes sense for me to buy an ATS, okay? But I do enough that I should do something besides having somebody manually look through all these, okay? So that's how I'm not going to contradict myself. I'm just going to change the scope. Okay. All right. So I might say, okay, this is a really good solution for a low code tool. I might, for instance, take I might use something like N8N. You could use Zapier. It doesn't really matter. So, okay. As soon as I'm going to have a database of my job descriptions. Say I put that in Baserow, or Airtable, some sort of off-the-shelf database that any consumer can go and download, or SaaS company, you can go and sign up for 5 minutes. Okay. Then I might say, okay, whenever a new application comes in from my system, whatever that system is, I'm going to pop it into call it a Google Drive. Again, not super sophisticated, let's call it a Google Drive. I might then have my N8N low code workflow. I would drag a Google Drive node onto the canvas. It says, whenever a new entry hits Google Drive, retrieve that entry. Then I might say, okay, now once you've got that entry, you're going to take that entry, whether it's the form that they filled out and their resume, and you're going to pull in the job description that they applied for, and you might have one or more AI agents evaluate the quality, the fitness of that particular candidate given your description. And then, let's just keep it very simple, send you an email that lets you know this one is, for ones that score above a certain number, send you an email. For ones that it doesn't, put them back in a separate database in case you or somebody else wants to go back in there and just kind of make sure that it was done. That workflow is pretty straightforward. And it doesn't require a custom development build. Any sort of sharp, curious, information-minded person could go and build that in N8N in half a day, right? And so by being clear on that design, right, assuming again, off the shelf isn't the right fit for you because of budget or whatever it is, right? Again, if you're big enough, you should be looking at ATS. But if you're not that big, right? Low code is what would allow you to mimic what the ATS does without having to know things like webhooks and semantic algorithms and all of these sentiment analysis. Right? You don't need to know all of that if you're using a low code tool. People building at the ATSs do, but you do not. Okay. So bucket 1, off the shelf. Bucket 2, low code. Which one you choose is going to be determined by the design. And the third bucket is when you finally have something hand built. Now, in this case, you are looking at something custom, you're looking for an engineer, you're looking for deployments that you manage. My general opinion on this is you should do this when you need to differentiate in a meaningful way competitively. So my general rule of thumb is you buy the commodity and you build differentiation. Okay? And so in that bucket, you have to be prepared to manage things like your own servers. You have to be prepared to manage things like your data sovereignty. You have to be prepared to spend quite a bit of money because building scalable production systems is still something that requires an expert. And yes, all of us are using Claude Code. All of us are using Fable. All of us are using the latest models to build the thing. Having said that, if your developer doesn't have working knowledge of security best practices or how to make code efficient or any of those kinds of things, and a lot of people that are vibe coding don't have that, you will get very bloated software that's very difficult to maintain and potentially a liability that gets hacked.
Right? Well, and I like to refer to that as, a design shortcut that's dressed up as a decision.
How do you mean?
So sometimes when we get to that point, and I know I'm really kind of stuck on design today, but it really is just so important. I feel like I just have to keep it centrally, right? So a lot of times we say, let's just hire a developer. Let's just go buy this enterprise platform, right? I mean, we get to that point as organizations or as companies, right? But those are the two most common shortcuts. I'm going to call it a design shortcut that we can make to get ourselves to a decision. Because we want to go in front of leadership and say, it feels like a decision. We decided to hire Go Low Code, or we decided to hand build, or we decided whatever it is that we decided. But we basically we did a design shortcut by making that decision because we still didn't have that workflow identified enough. Yeah. The developer can only, and you have to keep this in mind, the developer can only design the problem you give them to fix.
Yes.
And it's the exact same thing. So let's come back to the AI. We can only have an agent fix what we can be specific around asking them to fix. Like if you go on to Claude and say, hey, Claude, tell me what you think about the color blue. But I mean, that's pretty broad. But like, you're not going to get the specificity. We talk about prompts, right? You have to be able to have those specific prompting questions. And so we have to be careful that when we feel like we made a decision, we didn't just implement a design shortcut and we dressed it up as a decision.
Yeah, and when you speak about prompts, I think actually this is a really good distinction between somebody that is an actual good builder versus one that isn't, right? So somebody that's vibe coding, right, which is a new phrase that people use, and what it refers to is somebody who is sitting down with an LLM and building a product. Just, I have an idea for a new HR system. I want to start building my system, and I'm going to work with Claude to just kind of, build it. And it's called vibe coding because you're sitting down, and you might actually have a plan, but you're sitting down and you're basically just kind of like, it's like getting Claude to write an email, but for software. You're just telling Claude what you want, and Claude's building it, right? But if you don't have the experience to know what the right things are, so for instance, when we're sitting down to work with Claude to build these systems, we're talking about things like dry coding. We're talking about things like test-driven development. We're talking about things like refactoring and modularity, right? Things that the average person who's vibe coding wouldn't know anything about. Right. And as a result, they're going to build something that, for certain, but in many cases is likely to be bloated, is likely to have vulnerabilities. And it's not because the AI isn't capable, it's because the person that was building the system didn't know, they themselves didn't have enough context to build that system. So either way, like that design matters when you're getting to that point of build. So off the shelf is almost always the right place to start, particularly in larger companies, right? Low code is where I think more and more organizations should be investing, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of people development. I think that the class I taught at Michigan State University this past semester, and that we're doubling now this next semester, right? Most of what we did was using low code tools because I believe in the short run, low code is the future of knowledge work. Because AI can automate so much of what we do is information management.
Right.
And data pipelines and AI can automate so much of the migration of information. I think low code before long, I think, is going to become as standard as using Word.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And in fact, hopefully more standard, because Word's the worst. And so and so then the hand building stuff is the stuff where you're going to be building that differentiation. At that point when you are looking to build something, it should be because you see either in your market or in your organization a competitive advantage or a competitive configuration that you can't just get with low code or off the shelf. And by the way, because of off the shelf and low code, the preponderance of low code, anybody in your industry theoretically should be able to copy that. Everyone's going to do things their own way. Everyone's got their own unique signals, their own unique design. But with hand built, it's really only worth it if there's a significant enough differentiation capability that you're willing to say, we're willing to bet the future of our strategy on this particular thing, at which point you do need to make sure you've gone through those other steps. And it should really be the last resort. And for a long time, it's been the only resort for people that want to build things to streamline their processes.
Right.
Part of the reason why we're even winding down large parts of our current software business is because I would rather help people learn how to think about the problem in low code and then reserve my own development capacity for things that are really, really interesting.
Right.
And things where, they really do need our help with data sovereignty and security and all the other things that come with actually building a differentiated asset. Right. So these are really the only three ways you can approach building. Right. As I said at the beginning, building is really the easiest part if you've done the other steps. Identify the signal, gotten really clear about source, and done the design. The only three ways at the moment that you can approach building a thing is buying off the shelf, which is what most people should do in most cases. By investing in low code technologies, which I think is where most white collar work should be thinking going forward. And then finally, by hand building things, and it's no longer build versus buy, it's build by blend. You should only be looking to hand build when you're looking to build the differentiation and build an additional moat around your business, around your IP, and around your industry going forward.
And I think that's one of I just want to go back to one, I know we're getting ready to close, but go back to one point. Like we were talking about the knowledge needed, we started talking about prompts, right? Like the person that you're putting in charge needs to have, or the source, let's call it not the person, the source, I don't care where you're pointing it to, but you need to be able to have that be a knowledge-based wisdom space, right? I mean, if you think in just the world of work, right? There's a reason why over the years, mentor programs have designed the way they've been designed, right? Like we want someone who's been in the job for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever, to help transfer that IP to another worker.
Yes.
Right? And that worker, the earlier in career new person into the organization, needed to be pointed to the source, i.e. the mentor, to be able to extract that information because it wasn't held anywhere else. So I just like to use it's a very simple example, but I think it's one that we can all resonate because we've seen that in action. You're like, oh, that works. Well, I wonder why it works. Well, it's working because we're connecting a knowledge person to a wisdom database. It's why, HR or people are not going away, right?
Yes.
AI is not taking over everybody's job because we still need the wisdom worker to create the knowledge sources that we can point the agent to, whether we're going to low code or hand build, whatever we're going to do, right? When we're doing that, we have to have a wisdom source to be able to go. Going back to the thing that I built for Lead With, right? That couldn't have been built if it wasn't for me having a million years in HR and a million sources to point the Claude to extract that.
Yeah.
And so that piece is just critically important. And I think just using that kind of basic mentor example is an easy way to kind of like go, oh yeah, I've seen that in action. That's when your AI gets really good, when you're pointing it at a good wisdom source.
Well, if you think about even just the first three parts of the process we advocate, signal, source, design, AI can't do all three of those things.
No.
In fact, I would argue it can't do any of those three things,
Mhm.
right? Because it doesn't have a world model. It doesn't understand what the signals are.
Right.
It
It
can,
can't identify the problem, which is the most important thing, right? That's a human judgment space to say, we have this signal, we have this challenge, we have this constraint, right?
Yep.
That's not where you're gonna see AI shine.
it can't do it at the root.
Right.
At the source, it doesn't even know what sources are available,
Right.
but for what you give it.
Right.
And then when it comes to design, yes, it can help you design, but it doesn't understand the trade-offs and the goals required to make a good design.
Right.
And if you think through the first, last couple of episodes, right, we're 9 in at this point, right? If you think through the first 8,
Right.
yes, we talk about AI,
Right.
but you're really not using AI until you get to this
Yes.
stage here.
Right.
Because the rest of that's all the work that we have to do as humans.
And that's the mindset. I mean, we've talked many times throughout our, the mindset required to think about the workforce, think about the work, think about the signal, the problem, think about those things differently. That's the key.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the key to every organization as we move forward into the agentic era.
Julie,
Hey, I think that's
always a pleasure. I love it. It's always such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. This was great. For everybody, thanks for listening in. And as we always like to say before we end, let's stop